Zach, do you have any favorite creature or monster you would like to talk about?
I mean, one that we did not really get to in the werewolf episode that's kind of related, and I would kind of push it back to Jordan here because I know he knows way more than me, is the Nagual, which is the Aztec version of the werewolf, but it's like fun with extra steps.
Oh, yeah. Did we not discuss Naguals?
It got mentioned, but you said we're going to put it aside for now. So.
Oh, and then I never came back.
Yeah, you kind of mentioned kind of some of the later Christian Nagual traditions, but not like the ancient Aztec Naguals.
I'm going to let the Chaos Serpent swallow me and swear loyalty to him, and then I'm going to the Aztec Nagual is something else. So I know Paul mentioned the Chaos Conf motif earlier. Gods so you have the battle of in a pagan context, it's the battle between the storm god and the Chaos Serpent. And then the storm god wins and orders chaos. That's the sort of theological background. I'll avoid discussing the biblical version for the moment, but you see that motif in basically every culture. There's going to be exceptions, but like it shows up in the Ojibwe and the Aztec and the Chinese. Don't listen when people say that all Chinese dragons are good. They're not. Africa. But in the Aztec context, it's a little interesting because, the whole Aztec religion is based on human sacrifice. All of it. In the Aztec perspectives, the gods sacrificed themselves to create the universe, and thus man sacrifices himself in an act of repayment of the god's sacrifice to man. Which is why even, like from the Aztec perspective, even things that we would say have nothing to do with human sacrifice, they relate to human sacrifice, or forms of sacrifice. Like they're forms of penitence, all involved giving up blood. I know it's politically correct nowadays to pretend that's not the case. It's actually a very dishonest perspective because it means that we basically just lie about everything Aztecs believed and ignore what they had to say about the world for modern politics. But human sacrifice is essential. So when the Aztecs take on the shamanic werewolf that we see elsewhere, they give it their unique human sacrifice spin, where again, you consecrate yourself to the great worm, Tezcatlipoca, which is in fact the Aztec equivalent of the serpent. Much as anything can be an equivalent. And then the Nagual did in fact serve a similar shamanic function to the Inuit, but sort of localized within Aztec religious praxis. Last time I discussed after Christianization, Nahuatl religion changed drastically, and you start seeing Christian werewolves pop up, which is why the human sacrifice element, I don't want to say it disapparates, because we see certain New Age religious movements in Mexico are remarkably similar to certain ancient movements, but there is a separate non-human sacrifice tradition. But yeah, the Nagual is interesting. It formed the Nagual. I equated Nahuatl and Aztec. That's not great. They're not the same thing. Like thumbs and fingers type deal. But the Nagual is a sort of it's a shaman. He consecrates himself. I'm glossing over some of the other aspects that touch more on Nahuatl folk beliefs involving what's called a tonal. Everyone receives your guardian angel, but in an Aztec context, it's an animal. And that's what helps you engage in the sacrifice. Was there anything in specific you wanted me to bring up, Zachariah? Was that?
Oh yeah, I was interested in because the Nagual, they're much more varied than say just werewolves, right? You have were-jaguars, were-foxes, were-owls, etc.
Yeah, that's so. If we want to get really into it here, the Aztecs they had a religious calendar. Each day is associated with a specific thing, usually an annual animal. And the day you're born on determines your animal guardian spirit. At least that's according to Brinton. His work is very dated. It's about a century old and is based on older records yet. But at any rate, the calendrical portion is still true as regards current folk practice. So that animal sort of determines, it's your tonal, it determines your Nagual. The Nagual does fulfill a communal function, yeah. I mentioned the chaos serpent originally, but in the context of Aztec religious practice, but that is sort of less important than the Nagual's role as a shamanic figure who engages in, say, healing practice, divination. I'm trying to remember if he did weather magic. I'm blanking on that one. Probably. There's a lot of weather stuff in Aztec religion, but I cannot recall if the Nagual did anything in that regard. But yeah, sort of like fascinating figure between the Inuit shaman who does certain forms of animal transmutation and some other beneficent traditions, and then some of at least in an Aztec context, some of the less beneficent traditions.